At 14 p.m. on January 26, 1945, Second Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy, crouched in a shallow foxhole near Holtzwihr, France, watching 6 German panzer tanks emerge from the tree line 1,000 yards to his front. 19 years old, 18 months of continuous combat, over 240 German soldiers already killed. The Wehrmacht had committed 6 tanks and an estimated 250 infantry to retake the Bois de Riedveer. Murphy knew the pattern. German armor always led, infantry followed in white winter camouflage, and American positions always broke when the panzers got close enough. Not today. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, held this frozen clearing with exactly 40 men. The temperature stood at 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow covered everything. Murphy's reinforcements had not arrived. The 2nd Battalion, 30th Regiment, was still moving up. Hold the position. Those were his orders. 1 lieutenant, 40 soldiers, 250 German infantry, 6 tanks. The mathematics were brutal. Company B had suffered 102 casualties the day before. Every officer except Murphy had been wounded or killed. The 40 men remaining represented what was left of a full-strength rifle company of 187 soldiers. They had worked through the night trying to dig foxholes in the frozen ground. The soldiers made no progress. The ground was too hard. Murphy had positioned 2 M10 tank destroyers from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion along a narrow dirt road leading into the woods. Each M10 was a modified M4 Sherman chassis. Length 19 feet 7 inches, width 10 feet, weight 29,937 kilograms. Powered by twin GMC 6046 diesel engines, producing 375 horsepower total. The open-top turret mounted a 3-inch M7 gun, capable of penetrating 76 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards. Maximum speed 30 miles per hour on roads. Each also carried a Browning M2 .50 caliber machine gun, mounted on the turret for anti-aircraft defense. Murphy also had 5 armored half-tracks, positioned in a rough defensive arc. But he could see the German force forming up. 6 tanks. That meant Panzer IV, or Panthers. Both were superior to the M10 in armor and main gun capability. The Panther's 75mm gun could penetrate an M10 at 2,000 yards. The M10 needed to get much closer to have any chance. If the German tanks broke through, they would roll over Murphy's positions. The infantry following would sweep through the woods. Behind Murphy's position stood the headquarters elements of the entire 3rd Infantry Division. Battalion command posts, supply dumps, artillery positions. The division was spread thin across the Colmar pocket. There were no reserves. If Company B broke, the entire American line would collapse. The strategic stakes extended further. The Colmar pocket was the last German foothold on French soil. The Wehrmacht maintained 20,000 troops here, threatening the American 7th Army's flank. If the Germans broke out, they could hit General Patton's 3rd Army in the rear. They could potentially recapture Strasbourg. They could prolong the war by months. Every American general from Eisenhower down wanted the Colmar pocket eliminated. Murphy had studied the terrain. The clearing ahead formed a natural killing zone. 400 yards wide, 600 yards deep. No cover. But his men were too few and too exposed. The German infantry wore white winter camouflage. Murphy's men wore standard olive drab uniforms. Dark targets against white snow. At 13:58, Murphy made a phone call to battalion headquarters. He requested the artillery concentration he had registered earlier. Fire mission able. Coordinates already calculated. The Fire Direction Center acknowledged. Batteries ready. Murphy had 8 105mm howitzers from the 3rd Division Artillery on call. Each gun could fire 10 rounds per minute. That meant 80 shells per minute. But only if Murphy could keep the phone line intact and provide accurate targeting information. The German artillery barrage started at 1400. Shells impacted across Murphy's positions. One shell hit the tree next to a machine gun nest. Splinters killed 2 soldiers instantly. Another shell struck the leftmost M10 tank destroyer. Direct hit. The vehicle erupted in flames. The crew bailed out, running for the woods. Murphy watched the 6 German tanks advancing. They moved slowly, deliberately. Infantry followed 50 yards behind in squad-sized groups. The Germans were confident. They had overwhelming firepower. They had numerical superiority. They had momentum. If you want to see how Murphy held off 250 German soldiers and 6 Panzer tanks with a 50 caliber machine gun on a burning tank destroyer, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. Murphy gave the order at 1402. His men would withdraw to defensive positions 150 yards back along the wood line. The clearing ahead would become a killing zone. But someone needed to stay forward and direct artillery fire. Someone needed to hold the phone line. Murphy remained at his command post, a shallow depression in the frozen ground. No real protection. The field telephone sat on a wooden ammunition crate. A single wire ran back 200 yards to the battalion communications trench. That wire was now the only connection to the artillery batteries. Murphy picked up the phone at 1403. Fire mission able. Execute. The Fire Direction Center responded immediately. 8 105mm guns fired in unison. The shells took 18 seconds to travel from gun positions to target area. Murphy counted. The first salvo impacted 600 yards ahead, right on the German assembly area. Smoke and snow erupted. He called adjustments. Drop 100, right 50. The German tanks kept advancing. Range 800 yards now. Their turrets traversed, searching for targets. Murphy's men had pulled back. The German tankers saw an empty American position. Murphy watched through binoculars. The German infantry followed close behind the tanks. Too close. Textbook combined arms doctrine. The infantry protected the tanks from close assault. The tanks provided mobile firepower for the infantry. The Wehrmacht had perfected this at the beginning of the war. They were using it again. In 1407, the German tanks reached 600 yards. Murphy could see their markings now. Panzer IV. 5 of them definitely Panzer IV-H models. Long-barreled 75mm guns. Frontal armor, 80mm. The 6th might be a Panther. Harder to tell in the snow and smoke. The burning M10 on Murphy's left sat 40 yards away. Still smoking. Still in danger of exploding completely if the ammunition cooked off. The crew had abandoned it. But Murphy saw something. The 50 caliber machine gun was still mounted on the turret. The ammunition boxes were still attached. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun, length 65 inches, weight 84 pounds. Belt-fed, air-cooled, recoil-operated. Rate of fire 450 to 550 rounds per minute. Effective range 1 in 800 meters against personnel, 1,000 meters against light vehicles. Fed by disintegrating metal link belts. Each belt held 105 rounds. Standard ammunition mix included armor-piercing, tracer, and ball rounds. The German tanks reached 400 yards at 1409. Murphy made a decision. His command post position was collapsing. German tank fire had knocked out his second M10. The crew bailed out, running for the tree line. Small arms fire from German infantry cracked overhead. Murphy's field telephone still worked. The wire still connected to battalion. He grabbed the phone. He crawled toward the burning M10. The heat was intense, even at 10 yards. Black smoke poured from the engine compartment. Flames licked around the turret base. The vehicle could explode at any moment. Murphy climbed onto the rear deck at 1410. The .50 caliber sat on its pedestal mount, intact. Murphy swung it toward the advancing Germans. He checked the ammunition feed. One belt loaded, 105 rounds. 4 additional ammunition boxes sat in their storage racks. 420 more rounds. Total, 525 rounds. Murphy positioned himself behind the gun. The Germans were 350 yards away now. The smoke from the burning tank destroyer provided some concealment, but the heat was becoming unbearable. Murphy could feel it through his uniform. The metal deck was hot enough to burn through his boots. He pressed the butterfly trigger. The M2 roared to life. Muzzle velocity 2,910 feet per second. The armor-piercing rounds could penetrate 23 millimeters of armor at 500 yards. Not enough for the tanks, but devastating against infantry. Murphy fired in short bursts, 3-second bursts, 23 rounds per burst at 450 rounds per minute. He traversed left to right, covering the advancing infantry. Germans fell, others dove for cover, but they kept coming. The German infantry reached a drainage ditch at 1413. Range 300 yards. They were frantically discussing something, probably their next assault movement. Murphy could see them clearly now through the smoke. White camouflage uniforms, MP-40 submachine guns, stick grenades, squad leaders pointing toward his position. Murphy adjusted his aim. He pressed the trigger. The .50 caliber rounds tore through the drainage ditch position. Bodies slumped. The ditch turned red. Murphy had expended 125 rounds. He had 400 remaining. The field telephone cord stretched from the burning tank destroyer back to his original command post, then back to the communications trench. Murphy held the handset between his shoulder and ear while firing the machine gun. He called fire corrections. Drop 50, fire for effect. The artillery continued pounding the German rear positions. In 1416, the German tanks pushed forward. 5 Panzer foes and 1 Panther. They began firing their main guns at Murphy's position. 75mm shells impacted around the burning M10. The concussions were deafening. One round hit 15 feet away. The explosion threw frozen dirt across Murphy's position. Shrapnel pinged off the tank destroyer's hull. The Germans couldn't see Murphy clearly. The smoke from the burning engine compartment created a shifting curtain of concealment. When the wind pushed the smoke away, Murphy was exposed. When it swirled back, he disappeared. This uncertainty saved his life repeatedly. German machine gunners fired at where they thought he was, not where he actually was positioned. Murphy's legs began going numb from the cold and from maintaining his firing stance. The temperature remained 14 degrees. He had been standing on the burning tank destroyer for 6 minutes. 6 minutes of continuous exposure to enemy fire from 3 sides. Germans to the front. Germans flanking right. Germans trying to work around his left through a shallow draw. The ammunition counter on the M2 showed 280 rounds remaining at 1418. Murphy had fired 245 rounds in 8 minutes. Disciplined fire, short bursts. Each burst had a target. No wasted ammunition. A German squad attempted a flanking maneuver on Murphy's right at 1419. They emerged from a small fold in the terrain. Range 75 yards. Murphy traversed the .50 caliber and fired. 4-second burst. 31 rounds. The squad went down, some dead, some wounded. The survivors crawled back. Murphy's right leg took shrapnel at 1420. A German tank round had impacted nearby. Hot metal fragments tore through his boot and into his calf muscle. Blood soaked his wool trousers. He ignored it. He kept firing. The German tanks reached 200 yards at 14:21, point-blank range for their 75mm main guns. Murphy could see the commanders in their open hatches. The lead Panzer IV fired. The muzzle flash was enormous at this range. The shell screamed past Murphy's position and detonated in the woods behind him. Murphy called artillery on his own position at 14:22. "Fire on my coordinates. Danger close." The Fire Direction Center hesitated. Battalion commander got on the line. "Confirm your request," Murphy confirmed. "Fire on my coordinates. The Germans are right on top of me." The artillery fire shifted forward. Shells began landing 100 yards ahead of Murphy's position. German infantry scattered. Some died in the explosions. Others ran back toward their own lines. But the tanks kept coming. At 14:24, a second German squad tried the right flank again. Same approach, different result. Murphy was ready. He fired the moment they appeared. 3-second burst. 23 rounds. All 8 men in the squad went down. The .50 caliber at this range was unsurvivable. The heavy bullets tore through multiple soldiers. One round could kill 2 men if they were lined up. Murphy's ammunition counter showed 180 rounds remaining. He had 1 belt loaded, most of it expended. 3 full belts in the storage boxes. He would need to reload soon. Reloading would take 15 seconds minimum. 15 seconds of not firing. 15 seconds for the Germans to advance unchecked. The mathematics were changing. Murphy had been firing for 14 minutes. He had killed at least 40 German soldiers. By his own count, probably more. The German advance had stalled. The tanks couldn't push forward without infantry support. The infantry couldn't advance without the tanks providing covering fire. Murphy had created a deadlock, but ammunition was finite. At 14:26, Murphy reloaded the .50 caliber for the first time. He grabbed a fresh 105-round belt from the storage box. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the cold and from gripping the gun's spade grips for 16 continuous minutes. He fed the new belt into the weapon's feed tray. He closed the cover. He charged the weapon. Total time, 12 seconds. The Germans used those 12 seconds. A fresh platoon, maybe 30 soldiers, rushed forward from a covered position Murphy hadn't spotted. They advanced in a loose skirmish line. Range 250 yards when Murphy saw them. Range 200 yards when he opened fire. Murphy fired continuously now. Long bursts, 6-second, 7-second bursts, 46 rounds per burst. The Germans went down in clusters. The snow turned dark with blood, but they kept coming. German discipline was excellent. These were veterans from the Eastern Front. They had survived Stalingrad, Kursk, the retreat across Poland. They knew how to fight. At 14:29, a German machine gun team set up 400 yards away, MG-42. Rate of fire, 1-200 rounds per minute. They opened fire on Murphy's position. Tracers snapped past his head. Bullets sparked off the M10's hull. Murphy couldn't suppress them and engaged the advancing infantry simultaneously. He made a choice. He called artillery on the machine gun position. Target reference point Charlie. Fire for effect. 8 105mm howitzers fired. The shells landed on target. The MG-42 went silent. Murphy's ammunition counter showed 75 rounds at 14:31. He had 210 rounds remaining in storage boxes. Total, 285 rounds. He had fired 240 rounds in 21 minutes. At his current rate of expenditure, he had perhaps 12 more minutes of ammunition. The German tanks pushed forward again at 14:32. They had reorganized. 3 tanks abreast, advancing slowly. The commanders buttoned up, hatches closed. They were taking Murphy seriously now. Range 150 yards. The burning M10 beneath Murphy's feet was becoming critical. The ammunition stored inside the vehicle was cooking off. Small explosions popped inside the turret. The heat was intense. Murphy's uniform was smoking. The paint on the .50 caliber's barrel was blistering. The weapon itself was overheating from continuous fire. At 14:34, a German soldier got within 10 yards of Murphy's position. Murphy didn't see him until the last second. The German carried a Panzerfaust, anti-tank weapon. Effective range 60 meters. One shot could destroy the M10 completely. Murphy swung the .50 caliber down and to his right. Maximum depression. He fired point blank. 1 second burst. 8 rounds. The German soldier disintegrated. The Panzerfaust fell into the snow, unexploded. Murphy's hands were burned. The spade grips of the .50 caliber were hot from continuous firing. The metal had conducted heat from the barrel. Murphy's gloves had burned through. His palms were blistering. He kept firing. At 14:36, the ammunition counter hit 0. Murphy reloaded again. His third belt. 2 belts remaining after this. 210 rounds total. The Germans saw him reloading. They charged. Maybe 40 soldiers, all moving at once. Range 175 yards. Murphy loaded faster this time. 10 seconds. He opened fire before the charging Germans got within 150 yards. He fired in long, sweeping bursts. The .50 caliber cut through the German ranks like a scythe. Men fell in rows. The charge collapsed. Survivors crawled back or lay still in the snow, playing dead. At 14:39, something changed. The German tanks stopped advancing. Murphy had been firing for 29 minutes continuously. He had killed over 80 German soldiers by count, probably closer to 100. The Wehrmacht infantry was refusing to advance. Murphy could see German officers trying to rally their men. Some soldiers obeyed. Most stayed down. The mathematics had shifted. Murphy's sustained, accurate fire had broken the German attack momentum. The panzer commanders could see their infantry support disappearing. Tanks without infantry support were vulnerable. The Germans had learned this lesson in Russia. They weren't eager to push forward alone. Murphy's ammunition counter showed 55 rounds remaining at 14:41. He had 105 more rounds in the last belt. Total, 160 rounds. He had fired 365 rounds in 31 minutes. The .50 caliber barrel was glowing dull red at the muzzle. Smoke rose from the receiver. The weapon was on the verge of catastrophic failure from overheating, but Murphy kept firing. Short bursts now, 2-second bursts, conserving ammunition, keeping the Germans suppressed, preventing them from organizing another assault. At 14:43, the Germans made their final attempt. Every remaining soldier capable of fighting stood up simultaneously. Over 100 men. They charged across the entire front. No organization, no fire and movement. Just a desperate rush toward Murphy's position. Murphy loaded his final ammunition belt at 14:44. The last 105 rounds. He opened fire immediately. The .50 caliber hammered without pause. Murphy traversed from left to right, then back again. He fired where the Germans were thickest. Every burst knocked down multiple soldiers. The range closed. 150 yards, 125 yards, 100 yards. Germans were falling everywhere, but some kept coming. Murphy fired continuously. The barrel was white hot now. The wooden foregrip was smoking. Murphy couldn't touch it. He held only the spade grips, which were also burning through his destroyed gloves. At 14:26, Murphy's field telephone rang. Battalion commander on the line. "Murphy, get off that tank destroyer. It's going to explode. That's an order." Murphy ignored the order. He kept firing. The ammunition counter hit 50 rounds at 14:47. The German charge was faltering. Most of the attacking soldiers were down, dead, wounded, or taking cover. But small groups kept trying. 5 men here, 8 men there. Murphy engaged each group as they appeared. The German tanks finally withdrew at 14:48. All 6 panzers reversed course, backing toward the German lines. The panzer commanders had seen enough. Their infantry support was destroyed. The attack had failed. Continuing forward meant exposing their thinner rear and side armor to American anti-tank weapons. Murphy's ammunition counter hit 0 at 14:49. He had fired all 5.25 rounds. The 50 caliber barrel was glowing orange. The weapon was inoperable. Murphy climbed down from the burning tank destroyer at 14:50. The moment his boots hit the ground, the M10's internal ammunition storage detonated. The entire vehicle exploded upward. The turret flew 30 feet into the air. The hull split open. If Murphy had remained on the tank destroyer for 10 more seconds, he would have been vaporized. Murphy limped toward the American lines. His right leg was bleeding heavily from the shrapnel wound. His hands were burned. His face was black with smoke and powder residue. His uniform was scorched. He had been standing on a burning tank destroyer for 40 minutes, exposed to enemy fire from 3 directions, firing continuously with a heavy machine gun. American soldiers emerged from the tree line at 14:52. They had watched the entire engagement. They couldn't believe Murphy was alive. Sergeant Elmer Brawley reached Murphy first. "Sir, you need a medic." Murphy shook his head. "Get ready. They might come again." But the Germans didn't come again. Murphy's one-man stand had broken their attack completely. The Wehrmacht withdrew to their starting positions. The clearing fell silent except for the moaning of wounded German soldiers, scattered across 400 yards of frozen ground. At 14:55, Murphy organized a counterattack. Despite his wounds, despite his exhaustion, he led Company B forward. The 40 remaining soldiers advanced across the clearing. They encountered minimal resistance. The Germans were finished. Their attack had cost them over 120 dead and wounded soldiers. 6 tanks had withdrawn. The Wehrmacht had nothing left. Murphy's counterattack pushed the Germans back into the woods beyond the clearing. By 15:20, Company B had regained all lost ground and established defensive positions 200 yards forward of their original line. The German threat was eliminated. Murphy finally accepted medical attention at 15:25. A battalion aid station was set up in a farmhouse 300 yards behind the lines. The medic examined Murphy's leg wound, shrapnel fragments embedded in the calf muscle. The medic wanted to evacuate Murphy to the rear. Murphy refused. "I'm staying with my company." The battalion commander arrived. "Lieutenant, that's not a request. You're wounded. You need proper medical care." Murphy still refused. "Sir, if the Germans counterattack again, my men need their commander." The battalion commander recognized Murphy's determination. "Fine, get your leg bandaged. But if it gets infected, I'm personally carrying you to the aid station." Murphy agreed. The medic cleaned and dressed the wound. Murphy walked back to Company B at 15:40. The mathematics of the engagement were clear. 1 man, 1 machine gun. 40 minutes of continuous fire. 525 rounds expended. Over 50 Germans killed by Murphy personally. Another 70 wounded. The German attack broken completely. The American line held. The Colmar pocket secured. Company B remained in position through the night. The Germans never counterattacked. The Wehrmacht had learned a lesson. Some positions couldn't be taken. Some soldiers couldn't be broken. Some stands were impossible to overcome. January 27th, 1945, 0800 hours. Divisional intelligence officers arrived at Company B's position. They wanted details. Captain Walter E. Fellman, S2 of the 15th Infantry Regiment, interviewed Murphy personally. The questions were precise. How many Germans? How many killed? How long did you fire? Where did you fire from? Murphy provided exact answers. He estimated 250 German infantry in the attacking force. He counted over 50 bodies directly in front of his position. Artillery observers and forward observers estimated another 70 German casualties from indirect fire. The total German casualty count approached 120 soldiers. The 6 German tanks had withdrawn without being destroyed, but they never returned. Intelligence confirmed Murphy's account through multiple sources. American observers from battalion had watched the engagement through binoculars. Artillery forward observers had observed the entire action while calling fire missions. Other soldiers from Company B provided corroborating testimony. Every account matched. The destroyed M10 tank destroyer was examined at 1,000 hours. Ordnance specialists from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion assessed the damage. The vehicle was a total loss. The engine compartment had burned completely. The ammunition had detonated. The turret was destroyed. But remarkably, the .50 caliber machine gun mount was still attached. The weapon itself had survived, though the barrel was warped from overheating. Ballistics. Experts examined the weapon. The barrel showed extreme thermal stress. The rifling was partially melted. The receiver showed signs of metal fatigue. The weapon had fired well beyond its designed operational limits. A standard M2 Browning could sustain fire at 40 rounds per minute indefinitely. Murphy had averaged 13 rounds per minute for 40 minutes, but in bursts that reached 450 rounds per minute. The weapon should have failed. It didn't. At 12 onerous hours, General Alexander Patch, commanding the 7th Army, visited Murphy's position. Patch wanted to see the battlefield personally. He walked across the clearing with Murphy. German bodies still lay in the snow. American graves registration teams were working to collect the dead. Patch stopped at the burned M10. He examined the machine gun mount. He asked Murphy one question. Why didn't you pull back with your men? Murphy's answer was simple. Someone had to stay and direct artillery fire, sir, and someone had to keep the Germans off my men while they withdrew. Patch recommended Murphy for the Medal of Honor on January 28th. The recommendation moved through channels with unusual speed. Murphy had already received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He was already the most decorated soldier in the 3rd Infantry Division. The Medal of Honor would make him the most decorated American soldier of World War II. On February 14th, Murphy's wounds were finally judged serious enough to warrant evacuation. The leg wound had become infected despite treatment. He was sent to a rear area hospital. He protested. He wanted to stay with Company B. His protests were overruled. Murphy spent 3 weeks in the hospital. He returned to his unit on March 8th. By then, the 3rd Infantry Division had pushed deep into Germany. The war was approaching its end. Murphy received orders reassigning him to liaison duties. The Army didn't want to risk its newest Medal of Honor recipient in further combat. Murphy received the Medal of Honor on June 2, 1945, in a ceremony in France. He was 20 years old. The citation read, Colonel Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to prepared positions in the woods, while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. Captain Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. The citation continued. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate 2D Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad which was trying to creep up unnoticed on his right flank. Germans reached as close as 10 yards, only to be mowed down by his fire. He received a leg wound, but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counterattack, which forced the Germans to withdraw. The action at Holzwehr on January 26, 1945, represented a turning point in the Colmar Pocket campaign. The German counterattack, if successful, would have penetrated the American lines. Division headquarters, artillery positions, and supply dumps would have been overrun. The 3rd Infantry Division would have been forced to withdraw. The entire American offensive in the Colmar region would have stalled. Strategic analysts later calculated the consequences. A German breakthrough at Holzwehr would have delayed the clearing of the Colmar Pocket by at least 2 weeks. That delay would have allowed the Wehrmacht to shift reinforcements from other sectors. The American advance into Germany would have been slowed. The war potentially extended. Murphy's stand prevented all of this. 1 man, 1 machine gun, 40 minutes of fire. The strategic impact was enormous. The Colmar Pocket was cleared by February 9th, 1945. The last German forces on French soil were eliminated. The American 7th Army and French 1st Army could now focus entirely on the invasion of Germany. The tactical lessons were studied extensively. Murphy's action demonstrated several principles. First, the effectiveness of a single heavy machine gun in a defensive position. The M2 Browning .50 caliber proved devastating against infantry at ranges under 400 yards. Second, the importance of artillery coordination. Murphy's continuous fire direction kept 8 105 mm howitzers firing throughout the engagement. The combination of direct fire from the .50 caliber and indirect fire from the artillery created an impassable killing zone. Third, and most importantly, Murphy's action demonstrated that numerical superiority could be negated by superior positioning, superior fire discipline, and superior determination. The Germans had 6 tanks and 250 soldiers. Murphy had 1 machine gun. The Germans should have won. They didn't. Company B's casualties on January 26th were minimal. 2 soldiers killed, 7 wounded. All casualties occurred before Murphy climbed onto the tank destroyer. Once Murphy began firing, American casualties stopped. His covering fire allowed his men to withdraw safely. His sustained fire prevented the Germans from advancing. His final counterattack drove the Germans back completely. Murphy's Medal of Honor was one of 464 awarded during World War II. But his action at Holzwehr was unique. No other Medal of Honor action involved a single soldier holding off such a large force for such an extended period while standing on a burning vehicle in danger of exploding at any moment. The 3rd Infantry Division compiled statistics on Murphy's military career. He had participated in campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany. He had fought in 7 major amphibious assaults. He had been wounded 3 times. He had killed or wounded over 240 enemy soldiers. He had destroyed 6 tanks and several machine gun nests. He had captured, or helped capture, over 300 enemy soldiers. Murphy's total decorations eventually numbered 33. In addition to the Medal of Honor, he received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with V device for valor, 3 Purple Hearts, the Good Conduct Medal, and numerous campaign and service medals. France awarded him the Legion of Honor and the Croix de Guerre with Palm. Belgium awarded him the Croix de Guerre. The M10 tank destroyer that Murphy stood on was never recovered. It burned completely and was scrapped on site. No photographic evidence of Murphy's action exists. The engagement occurred too quickly and too close to the front lines for combat photographers to reach the scene. The .50 caliber machine gun was recovered and sent to Ordnance for analysis. After examination, it was declared unserviceable due to barrel damage and excessive wear. The weapon was scrapped. No effort was made to preserve it for historical purposes. The battlefield at Holtzwihr is now farmland. A small marker indicates the approximate location of Murphy's action. The marker was placed in 1948 by the 3rd Infantry Division Association. It reads, "Near this spot, on January 26, 1945, 2nd Lieutenant Audie L. Murphy, Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, United States Army, held off an attack by 6 German tanks and 250 infantry, killing or wounding more than 50 enemy soldiers. For this action, he was awarded the Medal of Honor." Murphy's story became widely known after the war. Life magazine featured him on its cover in July 1945. The headline read, "Most Decorated Soldier." James Cagney saw the cover and invited Murphy to Hollywood. Murphy initially resisted. He had no interest in becoming an actor, but he needed money. His family in Texas was struggling financially. Murphy's acting career lasted from 1948 to 1969. He appeared in 44 films, mostly westerns. His most successful film was To Hell and Back, 1955, based on his autobiography. Murphy played himself in the film. The movie was Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film until Jaws in 1975. But Murphy struggled with post-traumatic stress. He suffered from insomnia, nightmares, and depression. He became addicted to sleeping pills. He was one of the first public figures to speak openly about combat-related PTSD. He advocated for better treatment of veterans with psychological wounds. Murphy died in a plane crash on May 28, 1971. He was 45 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His grave is the second most visited site at Arlington, after President Kennedy's. The mathematics at Holtzwihr were clear from the beginning. 6 German tanks, 250 German infantry, versus 40 American soldiers in shallow foxholes on frozen ground. The Germans should have won in 15 minutes. Murphy changed the equation. 1 man, 1 machine gun, 525 rounds of ammunition. But more than that, 1 man willing to stand on a burning vehicle in danger of exploding. 1 man willing to expose himself to enemy fire from 3 directions. 1 man willing to ignore wounds, ignore burns, ignore exhaustion to protect his soldiers. The lessons of Holtzwihr extended beyond military tactics. Murphy demonstrated principles that applied to any extreme situation. First, training matters. Murphy had been in combat for 18 months continuously. He knew how to fire the M2 Browning. He knew how to call artillery. He knew how to read a battlefield. His training had become instinct. Second, positioning matters. Murphy chose the burning tank destroyer because it offered the only position that could cover the entire clearing. It was the worst position from a safety perspective. It was the best position from a tactical perspective. Murphy understood the difference. Third, discipline matters. Murphy fired in short, controlled bursts. He conserved ammunition. He selected targets carefully. Under extreme stress, with Germans charging his position, with tanks firing at him, with shrapnel hitting around him, Murphy maintained fire discipline. That discipline made the difference between 40 minutes of effective fire and 10 minutes of panic fire followed by an empty gun. Fourth, courage matters. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite fear. Murphy was terrified. His hands were shaking, his legs were numb. He knew he was probably going to die. He acted anyway. The story of Audie Murphy reminds us what individual action can accomplish. In an age of mass warfare, industrial-scale destruction, and million-man armies, one person still mattered. One person with a machine gun and determination changed the course of a battle. That battle affected a campaign. That campaign affected the war. Murphy never considered himself a hero. He gave credit to his training, his officers, his men. He said the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. He wore his medals reluctantly. He avoided publicity when he could. He understood that warfare wasn't glorious. It was necessary, sometimes, but never glorious. The 3rd Infantry Division continued fighting until May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered. The division had fought for 531 consecutive days of combat, longer than any other American division in Europe. The division suffered 27,452 casualties. Murphy's Company B suffered an 800% casualty rate, meaning the war company's roster was replaced 8 complete times during the war. Murphy's post-war struggles highlighted the cost of combat. He survived physically, but carried psychological wounds for the rest of his life. He spoke publicly about his nightmares, his inability to sleep without a loaded pistol under his pillow, his struggles with anger and depression. His advocacy helped remove some of the stigma around PTSD. The M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun that Murphy used at Holtzwihr continued service in some form for decades. The basic design, created by John Moses Browning in 1921, remained in service into the 21st century. American forces used .50 caliber machine guns in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. The weapon Murphy fired in 1945 was mechanically identical to weapons being fired 70 years later. The 3rd Infantry Division continues to serve. Based at Fort Stewart, Georgia, the division deployed to Iraq in 2003 and participated in combat operations there and in Afghanistan. The division maintains Murphy's memory. A building at Fort Stewart is named in his honor. His Medal of Honor and other decorations are displayed in the Division Museum. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single week. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Audie Leon Murphy doesn't disappear into silence.